Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my program is called Discerning What is True. I am going to be continuing to share The American Secret Establishment by Anthony Sutton, Sutton, um, as what I would call here the particular book. Again, it's available from Trine Day, Trineday. Might want to look at their site. Unfortunately, Anthony Sutton is no longer with us. And so we're going to continue the part that I stopped here about 45 minutes ago, maybe, yeah, about 30, 45 minutes ago. I guess it's about 30 minutes ago. I'm sorry they're long. I try to get as much as I can get in with the show because, this is all ground breaking information that is, a lot of people just simply go into this book and analyze it. But a lot of people don't have money just to buy, 10 to 15 different types of books that add up to $300, $400, you see. And this is for those who don't have that. I'm not saying anything against those people. I'm just saying simply is they don't have the money to spend lavishly on books. And I've been fortunate in my life and feel like simply is it's my responsibility as someone who's been fortunate and given something and has an interest in this to share with other people. So we're going to continue with Anthony Sutton's book, America's Secret Establishment, that took place at Yale University starting in the 1800s. And we're going to start with the area, what we call where they've had their influences upon society and culture. So the church is the next area they're involved in, and it's not a big part of their deal, but it's about 2% of the order is in the church that is all Protestant denominations, although this percentage has declined in recent years. The key penetration is the Union Theological Seminary, which is affiliated with Columbia University in New York. I didn't know that. The seminary is a past subject of investigations for communist infiltrations, has close links to the order. Henry Sloane Coffin, Coffin, a graduate of 1897, was professor of practical theology at Union from 1904 to 1926, and president of Union Theological Seminary, also known as the Red Seminary, from 1926 to 1945. Union has such a wide interpretation of religious activity that has, or used to have, even an atheist club for its students. Henry Sloane Coffin Jr., that is in 1949, was one of the Boston Five indicted on federal conspiracy charges, and this is only part of the order's penetration into the church. The law area, what they've been involved in. The major establishment law firms in New York are saturated with the order. In particular, Lord, Day, and Lord, dominated by the Lord family, already discussed. Also Simpson, Thatcher, Bartlett, especially the Thatcher family, that is David, Polk, Wardwell, and D.B. DeVois, Plimpton, the Rockefeller family law firm also. The communications area has been influenced also by this group. There has been a significant penetration in communication. Some examples are Henry Luce of Time Life is in the order. So is William Buckley, graduate of 1950. That can't be right. Is that right? I guess it is. National Review. Alfred Cowles, Cowles, 13, that is 1913, president of Cowles Communication, Des Moines Register, Indianapolis Star, and Emerald Bates, 1932, of Litton, Litton, Educational Systems, plus Richard Eli Danielson, 07, of Atlantic Monthly. Russell Willer Davenport, of 1923, of Fortune Magazine. John Chipman Farrell, Farrar, 1918, of Farrell Straus, the publishers, that is. Most prestigious award in journalism is a Neilman Fellowship at Harvard University. Over 300 were granted from 1937 to 1968. The first director of this Neil Fund was member Archibald MacLeish. The impact of it on industry. The oil industries, the oil companies had their links to the orders, that is the members, that is Percy Rockefeller, the Paynes, the Pratts, all linked to the Standard Oil, Shell Oil, Creole Petroleum, Sunconian Vacuum, also linked. A wide variety of manufacturing firms have members of the order, from the Donnelly family in Chicago, as the printers of the official airline guide and other references. Lumber companies like Weyerhaeuser, who is also a trilateralist, and the dresser industries, and so on. The dresser industry is also involved in the grinding and machining parts of uh, burrs and stuff like that nature. I've heard of them. They have also been involved in the Federal Reserve System. A dozen members can be linked to the Federal Reserve, but one appointment is noteworthy. Pierre Jay, 92, whose only claim to, this was in 1892, his only claim to fame in 1913 was to run a private school and be as obscure vice president of Manhattan Bank, yet he became first chairman of the New York Federal Reserve. That is the real significant reserve bank. Out of the 12 banks, the one in New York is the one that counts, folks. Nothing there. All other ones are subject. The White House, politics and government. This is the area where the order has made headway with names like Taft, Bush, Stimson, Chafee, Leavitt, Whitney, and Bundy, and so on. It will take a separate volume to cover this story. In Memorandum 9, we describe just one example, the Bundy operation. Memorandum number 6, operations of the order. In 1981, the Anglo-American establishment by Carroll Quigley was published in New York by a small establishment publisher. Quigley was formerly an instructor at Princeton and Harvard, and then professor at the School of Foreign Services at Georgetown University. Georgetown University is known as the International Affairs area, also teaching people to begin to work in foreign affairs. The publisher notes in his introductory that Quigley had been unable to find a major publisher for the manuscript. This is not surprising. The book blows the lid off the British equivalent of the order. And I have that book here, The Anglo-American Establishment. We'll go through that book sometime. It has nothing at all to do with the American establishment, which is hardly mentioned, but it has a lot to do with the British establishment, that is. The publisher probably inserted the word American into the title to enhance marketability in the States. Quigley described in a minute detail the historical operation of the British establishment, controlling by the secret society and operating very much as the order operates in the U.S. This is the real significance of Quigley's explosive book. By the way, the British have had basic control of the United States for a long time. They may not have won the war, but they've always had their hands involved in meddling in the United States, period. The group, the British secret society known as the Group, or just plain US, was founded at Oxford University, much as the Order was founded at Yale, without the Masonic mumbo jumbo. As you noted in Memorandum 5, the group operates in a series of concentrated circles, and like the orders, consisted of old line families allied with private merchant bankers, known in the U.S. as investor bankers, or investment bankers, I should say. Bearing in mind the proven existence of the group, the operations of the order, and the kind of penetration it has achieved cannot be explained at mere chance. By examining the order's operations, we can penetrate or generate a picture of its objective without access to any internal constitution or statement of objectives, even if such as this. It may only be word of mouth. By contrast, the group's objective is recorded in Cecil Rhodes' will. It was, you see. The extension of British rule throughout the world, the perfectioning of a system immigrating from the United Kingdom, and the colonization by British subjects of all lands wherein means of livelihood are attainable by energy, labor, and enterprise, and the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. This objective is, of course, ridiculous and somewhat immature, but no less ridiculous and immature than the New World Order objective of the order. Yet the group has controlled British policy for over 100 years and still does. Both the group and the order have been created by the Anglophiles, who want to pattern the world on a Hegelian Anglo hybrid culture, where the Latins, the Slavs, and the Sino races fit in not considerable. But clearly, these cultures will be disinclined to become pawns of either the British Empire or the New England Yankees. Even within the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of nations is unlikely that it will take place in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, would accept the constitutional bondage envisioned by the Cecil Rhodes. Both secret organizations overlook, and there is a philosophical basis for this neglect. The natural right of any ethnic group, be it white, black, or yellow, English, Slavic, or Latin, to develop its own culture without coercion. Unlike this author, Quigley sympathizes with the ends of the group, although he terms this method despicable. Both the group and the order are unwilling or unable to bring about a global society by voluntary means, so they opt for cohesion. To do this, they have to create wars and revolutions. They have ransacked public treasures. They have oppressed. They have pillaged. They have lied even to their own countrymen. How have they done this? We'll see. Modus operandi of the order. The activities of the order were directed towards changing our society, changing the world to bring about a new world order. This will be a planned order with heavily restricted individual freedom, without constitutional protection, without national boundaries or cultural distinctions. We deduce this objective by examining and then summing up the actions of individual members. There has been a consistent pattern of activity for over 100 years, in fact, far more than 100 years now. Part of this activity has been in cooperation with the group, with its parallel and recorded objectives. Now, if, for example, we found that the dominant interest of members was raising ducks, that they wrote articles about ducks, bred ducks, sold ducks, formed duck studying councils, developed a philosophy of ducks, then it would be reasonable to conclude that they have an objective concerning ducks. That is, that this is not mere random activity. Historically, operations of the order have concentrated on society. Now, to change society is a specific manner towards a specific goal, a new world order. We know the elements in society that will have to be changed in order to bring about the new world order. We can then examine the order's actions in this context. Yeah, my videos that I've shared with you by Nikki Rapano are key. Nikki Rapano gets down to the brass tacks, folks. Her works her book is worth gold because she deals with the workings of it in the community and the communitarianism, you see, and the destruction of the individual rights. So anyway, these are just, what I'm saying simply is this is a broad, this is a broad picture what I'm painting here of what I would call Anthony C. Sutton's deal. But you have to see this first in order to see also the communitarianism that she shares, Nikki Rapano shares, and how they're doing it now, right in your face, and have been doing it for over 40 years, easily. So more or less, their elements would be education, how the population of the future will believe, the deal with money, the means of holding wealth and exchanging goods, the law, the authority to enforce the will of the state. A world law, a world court is needed for a world state. Politics, the direction of the state. Economy, the creation of wealth. History, what people believe happened in the past. Psychology, the means of controlling how people think. Philanthropy, so that people think well of the controllers. Medicine, the power over health, life, and death. Religion, people's spiritual beliefs. The spur to action for many. Media, what people know and learn, short current events, and continuality, power to appoint who follows in your footsteps. Operations in each of these areas will be detailed in subsequently volumes. For example, in the next volume, The Order Controls Education, we will describe how Daniel Cold Gilman, president of Johns Hopkins University, imported the wound psychological methods from Germany, WUNDT. Then welded education and psychology in the U.S. established laboratories, brought these educational laboratories into major universities, and generated hundreds of PhDs to teach the new educational conditioning system. One of the first of these was Johns Hopkins doctrine was John Dewey. This result we will well know. The educational morass of the 80s, where more kids, not all, can't spell, read, or write, yet can be programmed into mass behavior channels. The order next move was to control the foundation. They got all the big ones, that is Carnegie, Ford, and Peabody, Slater, Russell Sage, and so on. That's the topic of another volume, though. As in the education, the modus operandi of the order was to get in first and set the stage for the future. The initiative objective was to established in directions in an organization, that is, selections of managers, intuitive or moral enough to catch on to the direction, kept the momentum going. In the case of foundations, the order has usually maintained a continual presence over decades. So we'll continue on today with Anthony Sutton. When it comes to activities by individual members, at first sight, the pattern is confusing and superficial, inconsistent. Let's give some examples. Andrew Carnegie profited from war through his vast steel holdings, but under the guidance of member Daniel Cole Gilman. Carnegie was also an enthusiastic president and financial backer of the American Peace Society. This is seemingly inconsistent. Could Carnegie be for war and peace at the same time? Next section, the League to Enforce the Peace, founded by members such as William H. Taft and Theodore Marburg, was promoting peace, yet actively urging U.S. participation in World War I. How could the League be for one thing as war and then another thing as peace at the same time? Control both deals, you see. In the 1920s, W. Avery Harriman was a prime supporter of the Soviets, with finances, diplomatic assistance, and a time when such aid was against State Department regulations. Harriman participated in Ruskhombon Bank, the first Soviet commercial bank. I'll spell it to you: RUSKHOMBANK. Vice President Max May of Guaranty Trust, dominated by the Harriman Morgan Industries, became the first vice president of Ruscom Bank, in charge of these foreign operations. In brief, an American banker under the guidance of a member of the order had a key post in a Soviet bank, that is. But we also find that Avery Harriman, his brother Roland Harriman, and members of E.S. James and Knight Woodley through the Union Bank, in which they held a major interest, were prime financial backers of Hitler. So you got to understand simply here, so back at what we call the start of before the Second World War, Hitler was supported by the bankers and the investors. Also, the communists involved were supported by bankers and industrialists also. It's part of the Hegelian dialectic, see, folks. And this is where people can't get it. They can't figure it out. There's two different streams here, two different types of socialist models, one being Marxist, one being what I would call, I forgot. I'm thinking of the name of the group, and they're well known today. They're actually they're supposed to be in Ukraine. I'll think of it. Hold on. So, in the Bundy family, we have memorandum on them later. It gives us another example of seemingly inconsistent. William Bundy was with the Central Intelligence Agency for a decade. George Bundy was National Security Assistant to President Kennedy and Johnson. So the Bundys presumably supported U.S.-European policy, which is pro-NATO, that is. Yet the Bundys have been linked to activities and organizations which are anti-NATO, and indeed pro-Marxist. For example, the Institute for Policy Studies. Are the Bundys inconsistent? No. No, they're not. You can see this going on. The other organizations are fascists. So it's the fascists and the communists, but they're two different types of forms of socialism. Communist is the extreme. Fascism is socialist. And you also have the Italians with Mussolini. All different types of socialism, but one's to the extreme. That is communism. Among individual members of the order, we find a wide variety of publicly proclaimed beliefs, ideologies, and politics. William Buckley periodically choose out the Soviets. On the other hand, members like John Burt, B-U-R-T-T, has been a member of a dozen committed Communist Fronts groups. Member William S. Coffin Jr. spent 3 years with the CIA and then became a leader of anti-Vietnam War activity throughout the National Conference for New Politics and Clergy and Layman Concerns about Vietnam. They're all players, folks. In fact, Coffin was one of the brightest Boston Five charged and indicted for his conspiracy to violate federal laws. And of course, W. Abraham Harriman is elderly statesman of the Democratic Party. Quite a mixture of beliefs and activities, though. Do they reflect inconsistent philosophies? How can the order have a consistent objective with this purported of individual sections or actions? The answer is they are not at all inconsistent because the objective of the order is above and beyond these actions and in fact these seemingly contradictions. The state is absolute. That's what they believe. This is what, um, again, was shared with these critical information from Nikki Rapondo. It's all about the state, folks. This is what you're being taught. So the individual is being thrown away, and what we call uh, the whole deal with going on with people, the system. You see. Anyway, I've kind of got off here. So let me get back to the subject. How can there exist a common objective where members are apparently acting opposite to one another? Probably the most difficult task in the world would be to get across to the reader what is really an elementary observation, that the objective of order is neither left nor right. Left and right are artificial devices to bring about change, and the extremes of political left and political right are vital elements in the process of controlled change. The answer to the screaming or seeming political puzzle lies in Hegelian logic. Remember that both Marx and Hitler, the extremes of left and right, presented as textbooks enemies, evolved out of the same philosophical system as the Hegelianism. And this is part of the process of what we're doing with the communitarians. It's a continued right and left and against what we call anti-individual rights. It's come down to that point that the state is the ruler. And they control the dialectic, you see. That's what this is about too. They're marching us along as we continue, don't see what's going on. We're not even aware of what's going on. The dialectic process did not originate with Marx, as Marxists claim, but with Fichte, F-I-C-H-T-E, and Hegel in late 1800s and early 19th century Germany. In the dialectical process, a clash of opposites brings about a synthesis. For example, a clash of political left and political right brings about another political system, a synthesis. The two neither left nor right. This conflict of opposites is essential to bring about changes. Today, this process can be identified in the literature of the Trilateral Commission, where change is promoted and conflict management is termed the means to bring about this change. In the Hegelian system, conflict is essential. Furthermore, for Hegel and systems based on Hegel, the state is absolute. I'll say that again. The state is absolute. The state requires complete obedience from the individual citizen. An individual does not exist for himself in their so-called organic systems, but only to perform a role in the operation of the state. You're a nobody. That's what's happening right in front of us, folks. He finds freedom only in obedience to the state. Well, he's only allowed that freedom at that point, and they give him only what I would call like a cow in a field with a fence. That cow has freedom in that whole area, but he can't go further than the fence. There was no freedoms in Hitler's Germany. There is no freedoms for the individual under Marxism. Neither will there be in the New World Order. And it sounds like George Orwell's 1984, or is it? In brief, the state is supreme and conflict is used to bring about the ideal society. Individuals find freedom in obedience to the rulers. So who or what is the state? Obviously, it's a self-appointed elite. It is interesting that Fichte, F-I-C-H-T-E, who developed these ideas before Hegel, was a Freemason, almost certainly Illuminati, and certainly was promoted by the Illuminati. For example, Johanna Wolfgang Goethe, Abraz in the Illuminati Code, pushed Fichte for an appointment at Jena, J-E-N-A University. Well, that's interesting. Goethe, G-O-E-T-H-E, was involved. I'd like to know more about that. I have looked at him in the past. Furthermore, the Illuminati principles that the end justifies the means, a principle that quickly scores an immoral and used by both the group and the order, is rooted in Hegel. Even the anonymous Yale student who wrote the verse in Memorandum 3 observed this principle at work on the Yale campus. This then is a vital part of an explanation of the order. When co-founder Walter Russell was in Germany in 1831 and 32, there was no way he could have avoided Hegelian theory and discussions. It was the talk of the campus. It swept intellectual Germany like a Pac-Man craze. Most Americans have not even heard of it, and those who have don't want to hear any more about it. Why? Because the assumptions are completely at the variance with our sense of individual freedom and constitutional guarantees. Most of us believe the state exists to serve the individual, not vice versa. You see, they've completely switched it. It's been inversion. The order believes the opposite to most of us. That is, it's crucial to understanding what they are about. So any discussion between left and right, while essentially to promote change, is never allowed to develop into a discussion along the lines of Jeffersonian democracy, i.e., the best government is least government, while the discussion and funding is always towards more state power, use of state power away from individual rights. So it doesn't matter from the viewpoint of the order whether it is termed left, right, Democratic, Republican, secular religion, so long as discussion is kept within the framework of the state and the power of the state. This is a common feature between the similar positions taken by members. They have a higher common objective in which clash of ideas is essential. So long as rights of the individual are not introduced into discussion, the clash of ideas generate the conflict necessary for change. So here's the deal. You see, they want the right and left to fight on its own based upon democracy and republic, which will create what we're seeing now, communitarianism, which is what Nicky Rapano has talked about. Neither, as far as I know, neither did Anthony C. Sutton see this, neither did Eustace Mullins see this, you see, because they passed away. Now, I've assumed that Sutton probably saw some sense of that already. So let's continue. The order believes the opposite to most of us. This is crucial to understand what they're about. So any discussion between left and right, okay, we already talked about it. This is a common feature between the similar positions taken by members. They have a higher common objective in which clash of ideas is essential. So lost as rights of individuals are not introduced into discussion of clash of ideas generate the conflict necessary for change. As the objective to also global control, emphasis is placed on global thinking, that is internationalism. This is done through the world organizations and world law. The great contribution to the task to the order was on the world court system and world law to the international aspect of the new world order. Memorandum number 7, how the order relates to the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and similar organizations. Organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, that is CFR, do not fit the requirements for a conspiracy. They're simply too large and their membership is not secret. The membership list for the order has never surfaced until now. Anyone can obtain a list of members for the CFR and the Trilateral Commission. Also, too many people are included as members in the organization who are just not given to membership in conspiracy groups. Certainly, there is off-the-record discussion, and certainly the general direction of U.S. policy reflects majority thinking in these organizations, but they are not conspirators. Moreover, the CFR and its sister organization are not geared to actions and implementations of policy. Compare, for example, the Brown Brothers Harriman firm with 9 members of the order and CFR. Obviously, the first is more cohesive, yet more low profile, more able to conceal its actions, yet more action-oriented. The larger open organizations are a forum for discussion, a place where ideas can be kicked around, a rich man's club, as someone commented, where people can be assessed, where discreet comments and criticism can be made away from a noisy press and possibly unsympathetic public. They may not be elected bodies, though, but neither are they conspirators. They fall in the shadow of a conspiracy, though. They are neither democratic or dictatorship. The role of the order is simply this. The order is represented in these organizations, but does not always dominate. David Rockefeller, a former chairman of the CFR, is not a member of the order. Only Per C. Rockefeller has represented the family, but the present CFR chairman, that is William Winston Lord, that is, we can present the relationship between the order and the larger group as a series of concentrated circles. The CFR sector from an outer circle, i.e., a pentaton. They exist in a shadow cast by an inter-organization. See, it is this inner organization that needs to be surfaced. The order in the inner circle in Chapter 322 is a part of this inner circle because it is unlike Chapter 322. It is the only chapter in the U.S. we suspect but cannot yet prove at least one another. How does Chapter 322 of the order relates to other organizations? So how does it relate? So we have a circle here. And we have at the very top the Council of Foreign Policy, CFR. But these are all outward groups, okay? The Bilderbergers are another outward groups. Then you have the Atlantic Council, which is part of NATO. It's an outward group. Then you have the Bohemian Club, which is actually in San Francisco, another outward circle. Then you have the Pilgrim Society, that actually is another outward group. And then you have a group called the Trilaterals. But that's only the outer circle. Then there's what they call the inner circle, which would be part what we call Chapter 322 of the order, you see. And then you have the inner core. And that inner core is a small group of men, very small, where they know all the things that are going on. You see, and usually these are be what you call groups you don't hear much about, or certain people are involved in these groups. Continue on. So the outer circle made up of large open organizations with some memberships coming from the order. The inner circle made up of one or more secret society like the 322. We can only prove one chapter at this time. And then you have the inner core, a secret society within a secret society. This is the inner decision-making core, you see. We cannot prove it exists, but logic suggests that some members of this inner circle will form an executive committee, an action committee, an inner core. While we cannot prove the existence of an inner core, there are some obvious candidates for membership, and we could hazard a guess as to the identity of the chairman. The outer circle is like the Council of Foreign Relations as the largest organization and the outer circle. It has almost 2,500 members at any one time. As member of the order, it is its entire history. The Trilateral Commission has 200 members worldwide, only 70 in the United States. There are younger organizations, the CFR, which dates from 1922, the Pilgrims from 1900, the Trilateral Commission in 1973, and the Bilderbergers from the 1950s. How many members of the order are in the CFR? This is not the place for exhaustive analysis, but a general idea can be gained from looking at names. The order begins with the lower B. The following are members of the Order and Council of Foreign Relations, such as Jonathan Bingham, the Congressman, William F. Buckley, the editor of National Review and the Order House Conservative, McGeorge Bundley, the Foundation editor or executive, William Bundley, which was CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush, the President of the United States. The makeup of the Council of Foreign Relations reflects its purpose as a meeting ground, discussion forum. The CFR mainly consists of government officials, industrialists, and academians. The order has a distinct different makeup, many more lawyers, for example, and a wide variety of declared occupations with far fewer industrialists. He doesn't mention the group that actually Eustace Mullins talks about, not Eustace Mullins, but Dr. John Coleman, who talks about Tavistock, but also talks about the 300, which I believe actually is the part of the power circle here. Because there's such small people, a small group of people, 300 worldwide. Let's continue on. Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission was founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller and comprises of 200 members worldwide, of whom about 77 are Americans. There is no overlap among membership, for example. So lumber industry Frederick Weyerhaeuser was in the order, but his son is in the Trilateral Commission and not the order. Similarly, Robert Taft Jr. is in the Trilateral Commission, but not in the order, even though the order was co-founded by his great-grandfather, and 8 Tafts have been members. The link is elusive. Conceivably, there may not be a link, you see. The Trilateral Commission is not a conspiracy. Its membership list is completely public. It costs, it's only a postage stamp to get one. The Commission publishes dozens of booklets. The organization is completely above ground. In fact, this author has openly debated with George Franklin Jr., coordinator of the Trilateral Commission, on the radio. Mr. Franklin did show a rather ill-conceived dislike for the assault on his pet global New World Order and made the mistake of attempting to disguise the objective, but evasions and hostility do not constitute a conspiracy. Conspirators just don't appear on radio, you see. They don't. They don't come on, folks. They're not going to be out in front. They're not. That's not what it's about, you see. Again, anything else out front, again, is a show. You have to see that also. Temporarily, the following facts should be held in mind. J. Richardson Dillsworth at room 3600 Rockefeller Plaza, and the Rockefeller Family Associates Chief Financial and Administration Officer, is a member of the order. Perry Rockefeller in 1900 was a member of the order also, but no other Rockefeller name is on the list. It may be that the Trilateral Commission will prove to be a purely David Rockefeller personal endeavor rather than a broadly established vehicle. However, trilateral purposes, as portrayed in the literature, are almost identical to those of the order. It may be a vehicle to attain an interim goal, i.e., 3 regional groupings. In this case, J. Richard Dillsworth is the conduit and the liaison. Bilderbergers. So far as we can trace, only William F. Buckley is a member of the Bilderbergers and the order. The Pilgrim Society. The order does not show up directly in the executive committee of the Pilgrim Society, but only through family names, Aldrich and Pratt. Pilgrim Society is probably a rather harmless social club, using its annual dinners to cement ties between the British and American establishment. The Inner Circle. Chapter 322 of the order differs from the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, and similar organizations that it is truly a secret society. Its purpose and membership are not disclosed. Its paranoia about secrecy and its covering its trail. The circumstances that surround the founding of the scroll and key in 1850 suggest this secret society may, in fact, be Chapter 323. But this is pure speculation. So we have two secret societies that differ extensively from CFR, trilaterals, and others, which can be seen as making up an inner circle. Even this inner circle is too large for decision making. No doubt it includes many active or just plain bored, that B-O-R-E-D members, even members who have forgotten they were ever initiated or who might be shocked to read in this book that they belong to a subversive organization. So logically, there is a secret society within the secret societies, you see. Again, we cannot prove it, but it's a logical deduction. This would be an executive committee that controls finances and makes basic decisions. Another important distinction between the outer core and the inner core is a fundings. This is important between what we call, because funding controls everything. The families in the order are closer to more foundations and more sources of funding than the Rockefeller family. To be sure, the Rockefeller family had 1% of Chase Manhattan stock, enough for control, and it has influence in the Rockefeller Foundation. But this doesn't compare to the centuries-long pervasive influence of the order. Remember, it was the order that got John D. Rockefeller off the ground with the General Education Board, not the other way around. That's correct. Rockefeller is not what we call I'm saying this from my own. Rockefeller is seen by Americans as pivotal, but in reality, he is not a major person, folks. He's just a poster board guy, you see. It's an open question quite how the trilaterals fit with the order. It may be the international aspect of the order. It may be Rockefeller's dominant group. Many of these old line families see the Rockefellers as upstarts, a Ritchie group, not quite on the outside looking in, but definitely not socially acceptable without such reservations, except for their money, of course. Anyone who heard Nelson Rockefeller speak and compared his syntax to the published charm of a Boston valiant will understand there's a New England saying that the Lowells only talk to the Cabots and the Cabots only talk to God. The Rockefellers just are not in that league. You see, they're not in, they're nowhere near what it is. They're not in the inner court. And if we may be excused a little gossip, we have been told by several established people like David Rockefeller is just not too bright. And Nelson Rockefeller was the only man in America who could torture the English language to the extent of placing two non-sequences in one sentence. If we were to look back in 1983 from the year 2083, it could be that the Rockefellers will have followed in the footsteps of the Carnegies and the Morgans. Names of dusty files, but no longer represent in the power group, that is. Memorandum number 8, the chain of influence, that is. Initiates into the order are assured of career advancements and success, even wealth, provided they follow the rule to get along, you must go along. Intermarriage consolidations, the power of the families and expand their span of influence. Finally, a chain of influence spreads over many years, guarantees continuality, and must be extraordinary impressive to any new initiative who doubts the power of the order. We can identify two types of influence chains, a horizontal chain and a vertical chain. Both types are duplicated many times for the moment. We'll give a simple example. The horizontal chain of influence. Members of the order are to be found in every segment of society, in education, in foundations, in politics, in government, industry, law, and finance. Consequently, at any time, the order can tap influences in any area of society. Occupational breakdown of this order demonstrates the great breadth of this horizontal chain of influences. The major occupations of members are law, education, business, finances, and industry. Approximately the breakdown as are followed as is in occupations and percentage of members. So we look at the law category of this particular group. That is at Yale, the Sponesman, which were involved, that is in law, 18% of the people. In education, 16%. In business, 16%. In finances, 15%. And in industry, 12%. So that adds up to 77%. The rest is, we're talking about less than 23%. I mean, talking about 23%. And that would be different areas. Some would maybe in religion, some may be in foreign affairs, whatever. Again, these are important families because they're the cog, you see, but they're not the ones who make the initiatives. They are used for their money, their education type of deals, their business such and such, in order to continue the world order. So I'm going to look at something of the change of influence, how it works. Members of the order such as Williams Collins Whitney, 1863. Williams Howard Taft, Henry Louis Stimson, Stimson. William Howard Taft, 1878. Charles A. White, 1854. Harvey Hoster Bundy, 1909. William Putnam Bundy, 1939. McGeorge Bundy, 1940. James Jeremiah Wentworth, 1927, and Howard Howell II, 1940s. Non-members of the order were Elihu Root, Elihu Root, a Whitney lawyer, Marcus Raskin was an aide to Bundy, and Dean Atkinson was part of the Scroll and Key. Again, we know the Scroll and Key, as he's talking about simply, is also a secret group too, but we don't know much about them at all. Again, they're at Yale. In other words, these five occupational accounts for over 3/4 of the membership, and these are the key fields for control of society. Government politics accounts for only about 3% at any one time. This is misleading, as any member of the above 5 fields can find himself temporarily in and out of government through the revolving door phenomenon. The church accounts for only 2%. These are concentrated in Union Theological Seminary, the so-called Red Seminary, and the Yale School of Divinity. Notably, the areas of society least represented are those with the least ability to influence the structural direction of society. They may give depth and richness to society, but are not essential to its control and direction. For example, very, very few engineers have ever been members of the order. We only identify 5 engineers in the 150-year span. Yet engineering and technology are key elements in the success of material aspects of American society. Art, architecture, and music are underrepresented. Can only find 16 members of these 3 occupations over 150 years. Again, these occupations are not influential in determining the structure of society. Farmers are underrepresented, only 16 of 150 years, but we suspect some took up farming to get away from the order. In brief, at any one time, the order can call on members in any area of American society to do what has to be done. There's a vertical chain of influence that is attributed to the success of the order has been the ability to implement one of its principles. This principle is that only he who wears upon his breast their emblem, he for every post shall be considered best. The practice of absolute preferment for members of the order has worked to perpetuate its influence over time in a remarkable manner. You see, you have to have money, folks, to do this. You have to have education to do these things, you see. Before we look at this chain of influence, we need to look at some basic statistics. The order has only initiated about 2,500 members in its history in the United States. Each year, only 15 new members are initiated. No more, no less. On the other hand, between 800,000 and 1 million persons receive college degrees each year from an institution of higher learning, including about 30,000 doctorates. When you follow the chain of influence below, hold in mind that out of 30 to 40 million degree holders, a few hundred men, never women, or in this case, less than a dozen men, are presumed to be the only ones fit to occupy top posts in government. No one else is even seriously considered. We're asked to believe that only a few hundred members of the order are capable of guiding the United States. If we assume a random distribution of ability throughout the United States, then our evidence cannot be accounted for by chance. It must reflect, just on the basis of mathematical laws of average, a conscious series of choice. Unless you want to assume that all wisdom and the 11 abilities in the United States, all ability in the United States is generated solely by 15 Yale graduates each year. And that gets you back to the argument of this book. And we're going to stop this here at this point. We're going to stop the area of what I call active service. And we'll come back again, maybe tonight. We'll see. This was 44 minutes, almost 45 minutes here today. I wanted to share this information because I felt it's important. Very few people know about this American secret establishment. Again, you have to understand this is a cog, But you also have to understand without money and education and business, that type of thing, this would never occur, you see, because they need the funding for all this other secret things they're doing. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you listening. And I hope this is valuable for you in the near future. What I'm doing is putting out seeds. I read these books again for your enjoyment, but more importantly, to those who are willing to study and see these things, then you can set up your future. That is to help others in the future. That is to understand these things. Okay. Thank you for your help. And thank you for your time, and you have a good day. Take care.